The longer a man stays single, the more interesting something can happen to him. He may become harder to emotionally reach, not because he becomes heartless, not because he hates women, and definitely not because he's incapable of love. Sometimes, he simply becomes extremely comfortable with himself. When you spend enough time alone, you're forced to learn things a relationship might normally help you avoid. You learn how to deal with your problems without immediately running to someone. You learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions. You learn that loneliness and being alone are not always the same thing. And eventually, something changes. Being alone stops feeling like a punishment. It starts feeling like peace. And once a person gets used to that peace, they don't just let anybody disturb it. This is where people often misunderstand him. They might say, he's too cold. But sometimes, he's not cold, he's just selective. Because after spending years handling his own life, he doesn't necessarily crave someone to complete him. He wants someone who actually adds something meaningful to the life he already built. Drama becomes exhausting. Constant arguments become unattractive. Mind games start feeling childish. And inconsistency. That's where his patience can disappear completely. He may not argue. He may not beg. He may simply leave. And that's because solitude can teach you something powerful. You don't have to stay somewhere just because you're afraid of being alone. But there's another change that happens too. He starts watching people's behavior much more carefully. He begins trusting patterns more than promises. Because words are easy. Anyone can say, "I love you." Anyone can promise they'll change. Anyone can tell you exactly what you want to hear. But consistent behavior, that's much harder to fake. So instead of listening only to what someone says, he starts paying attention to what they repeatedly do. How do they treat people when they're angry? Do their actions match their words? Are they consistent when there's nothing to gain? Do they bring peace into his life, or constantly make him question where he stands? And this is why someone who's been alone for a long time may seem difficult to impress. It's not necessarily that his standards became unrealistic. He may simply have learned what happens when you ignore the warning signs. And eventually, freedom becomes something he doesn't want to casually give up. He starts valuing the ability to live without constantly explaining himself, without emotional turbulence, without guessing where he stands, without waking up every day wondering whether the person beside him is going to bring peace or chaos. But here's the part people often get wrong. A man becoming comfortable alone doesn't mean he no longer wants love. Sometimes it means he finally understands what kind of love he wants. He doesn't want a relationship just to avoid loneliness. He wants a relationship that makes his life better than his solitude. And that's a very different standard. Because when you've spent years building your own peace, you become careful about who you invite into it. Not because you don't want connection, but because you finally learned something many people discover too late. Being with the wrong person can be lonelier than being alone. And once you've truly experienced peace, you stop looking for someone to save you from solitude. You start looking for someone worth sharing your peace with.